Yeah, I want to call the regular meeting of the Village of Corrales governing body to order, please. This is November 12th, 2024. You might turn your phones off or set them on vibrate so that you don't disturb any discussion that's going on during the meeting. Having done that, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah.
Councilor Murray.
Here.
Councilor Burkett.
Here.
Councilor Alsabrook.
Here.
Councilor Knight.
Here.
Councilor Woolman.
Here.
Councilor Miera.
Here.
We're all here. Oh, yeah, I'm here too. So I need a motion to, if you'll notice, the agenda is modified just a bit. Try to, make it a little more reasonable for those with children. If they need to be out of here because it's a school night, they can leave a little earlier. But I think we've got all the bases covered. So I need a motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved. Second.
All in favor signify by saying yes
Yes.
or aye, whatever. Okay. All right. First on the agenda is approval of proclamations. And the first proclamation is declaring November 13th, 2024 as Nathaniel Carper Day in the Village of Corrales. Now, Brigadier General Nate Carper is currently serving as the Deputy Adjutant General, advising the Adjutant General in all aspects of daily operational activities of the New Mexico Army National Guard. General Carper was born in Charleston, West Virginia. We won't hold that against him. To his parents, Susan and Tommy Carper, both of whom are here tonight. He has had a number of deployments and assignments over the years, all with increasing levels of responsibility and command. General Carper has graduated from a number of military schools throughout his career. He has completed the Harvard Leadership in Homeland Security, the U.S. Army War College, Senior Service College, and Joint Professional Military Education Level 2. It's a mouthful. The Command and General Staff Officers Course, Advanced Operations Course, the Combined Arms Services Staff School, the Infantry Captain's Career Course, the Air Defense Artillery Officers Advanced Course, the Brigade, Battalion, and Company Level Pre-Command Courses, the Air Defense Artillery Officers Basic Course, and the U.S. Army Air Assault Course. General Carper has been awarded the Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Meritorious Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal with 1 Silver Oak Leaf, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Army Commendation Medal with 2 Oak Leaves, Joint Service Achievement Medal, Army Achievement Medal, 2 Oak Leaves, Overseas Service Ribbon, 2nd Award, Kosovo Campaign Medal with Bronze Service Star, NATO Medal, Global War on Terrorism, Expeditionary Medal, National Defense Service Ribbon with Bronze Service Star, Armed Forces Reserve Medal with M Device and Bronze Hourglass, Air Assault Badge, German Armed Forces Proficiency Badge Gold, and German Army Marksmanship Badge Gold. My gosh, General, you have done a lot. I'm impressed. I thought I went to school a long time. General Carper is currently married to the former Colleen Casey from Las Cruces, New Mexico, who is a school teacher here at Corrales Elementary School and has 2 children, Thomas and Maxwell, both of whom have attended Corrales Elementary School, and they reside here in Corrales. We are very honored. Now I would like to read this proclamation. Whereas Brigadier General Nathaniel Carper, Deputy Adjutant General, has dedicated 27 years of his life and career to the state of New Mexico and United States Army by dutifully serving in the New Mexico National Guard. And whereas the New Mexico National Guard has and continues to respond and provide life-saving services to the communities across New Mexico, ensuring safety, reducing suffering and loss of property damage while building strong and more resilient communities. And whereas Brigadier General Carper has meritoriously served on multiple overseas deployments during the global war on terrorism in our nation's capital, providing his leadership, expertise, and experience for national defense. And whereas Brigadier General Carper has made the Village of Corrales his home with his wife, Colleen, a Corrales Elementary School teacher, and his 2 sons, Thomas and Maxwell, both Corrales Elementary School students. Whereas the Carper family has supported various community events and veteran organizations to showing their dedication to others and providing service to the community, state, and nation. And whereas Brigadier General Carper has shown his devotion to service and an obligation to the community, state, and nation by being promoted to the rank of Brigadier General and accepting the position as the Deputy Adjutant General for the great state of New Mexico on 19 September 2024. Now therefore it is my honor, Jim Fahey, Mayor of Corrales, to hereby proclaim November 13th, 2024 as Nathaniel Carper Day in the Village of Corrales and encourage all residents to honor Brigadier General Nathaniel Carper and the positive impact he has had on our community and state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. That was incredible. To the village counselors and to the community members, thank you for this honor. It is truly humbling and deeply appreciated. I'm deeply appreciative of from this tonight. When I had the opportunity to be promoted a couple of weeks ago, I wanted, and I talked with our family about where the best to do it, and the opportunity to do it here in the village of Corrales, just right across the street at the park.
Right.
Was what we wanted to do to express our gratitude to this great village. We moved here 10 years ago, and we're not moving. We love it. So I just wanted to come tonight, one, to just thank you for this honor, but also to express my gratitude for what you guys do and the service that you provide to this village and to this community to make it such an outstanding place that it is, to allow us to raise our family here and have a great network of friends and be a part of an outstanding community. So thank you all for what your service and sacrifice. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this honor and privilege.
We are actually honored because you live here, because you're one of our citizens.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I need a motion to approve 24-04 proclamation for General Carper.
Move to
Carper Day.
approve proclamation 2404.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Does anybody want to make any comment?
Thank you.
Yes,
for your
sir.
Service.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, General. I have the unique opportunity to interact with you guys on a very regular basis, both you, your wife, and both of your children. And I'm happy that we have the chance to honor someone who's chosen a career of service and has been recognized for success in that career. So I'm honored to call you guys friends. Very happy that you're in the village and you guys deserve all of this. So thank you.
Councilor Miera, how do you vote?
Yes, sir.
Councilor Waldman.
Aye.
Councilor Knight.
Aye.
Councilor Alsobrook.
Aye.
Councilor Burkett.
Aye.
Councilor Murray.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you once again, General. Well, that was the fun part. Now we'll move on to proclamation 24-05 Small Business Saturday. I think is this the first year we've done this, Melanie?
No.
No, we've done it in the past.
So the Village of Corrales proclamation 24-05 Small Business Saturday, November 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, I'll go ahead and read this one too, so they don't feel bad. Whereas Small Business Saturday is an annual holiday that celebrates our small businesses and encourages consumers to shop locally at the start of the holiday season for unique products and experiences available only in our community. And whereas small locally owned businesses in the Village of Corrales are vital to our village and county's economic tax base. And whereas the U.S. Small Business Administration states that small businesses create 65% of net new local jobs. And whereas by supporting local businesses, you are in turn supporting your local economy, significantly more money stays in the community when purchases are made at locally owned businesses. And whereas small locally owned businesses in the Village of Corrales need our support now more than ever, and the holiday shopping season is critical to their success. And whereas Small Business Saturday is a tax-free holiday, the state suspends collection of gross receipts tax on sales of qualifying items at certain small businesses. And whereas the Village of Corrales joins Corrales Main Street in supporting locally owned small businesses. Now, therefore, I, James Fahey, Mayor of the Village of Corrales, Sandoval County, State of New Mexico, proclaim Saturday, November 30th, 2024, as Small Business Saturday in the Village of Corrales, and urge our citizens to support small businesses and merchants by shopping locally on this day, as well as throughout the year. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say now? Okay, Councilor Murray. I'll tell you what, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous. Okay, so proclamation 2405 passes. So next, approval of appointments. Richard Groff, a reappointment of the Corrales Senior Center Advisory Board. Richard Perea, reappointment to the Corrales Senior Center Advisory Board. And Mel Iper, reappointment to the Corrales Senior Center Advisory Board. Are any of those members here? Okay, I'd like to take a motion for all three at once unless somebody has an objection.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and second to approve all appointments.
Mayor, I do have a question about the senior center, if I could.
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that the village owns the senior center,
Correct.
but that the Meadowlark Senior Center kitchen provides the food for the meals.
I believe that's correct.
It's a large venue. We never consider that when we're thinking about where we can hold large meetings in the village. We're always looking for venue space. Is there any reason, and I know that the senior center kitchen staff in the past, or person who oversees that, has had some problems with potentially damage to equipment or whatever. Is there any reason why we can't use that as a venue for meetings in the village?
You can use the senior center after a specific hour because from 8 to 5,
7 to 5.
7 to 5, the county basically has it
But for evening,
for an evening. In fact, it has been used by the Harvest Festival.
Yeah, they had asked us not to rent it out in the evenings due to COVID. And they have a staff that comes in and disinfects the entire building at the end of the day to help keep our seniors safe. And so that's why we had been respecting that and not renting out the space in the evening, just because of COVID. But there's no reason, I mean, that was the reason before.
But the Harvest Festival group has used it. You have to come by and get the key and then turn it back into the
okay,
office. So it can be used,
it
yes.
can be used by community groups
Yes.
with advance notice.
Yes.
Everything. Okay, great. Good. Thank you.
Okay. So now it's time for our presentation.
We need to vote on the
Oh,
appointments,
oh,
please.
I got misguided there. So, no, we voted.
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Everybody said aye, so it's unanimous. You're just trying to confuse me. Not that hard anymore. So, presentations, concerned citizens regarding changes to the noise ordinance. Now, I believe Tessa Davidson is going to lead off. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, administrator, and council for inviting us to speak and present on our resident committee findings and work and research regarding proposed changes to the noise ordinance. This is not a fashion statement that I'm trying to promote. I had eye surgery, and so I'm sorry. Some of you are in focus here, and then I can't focus here, so I'm going to take these off and hopefully, yes, I can see up there, but I'll try my best not to interrupt my presentation because of my eyesight. First of all, I just want to say our committee well, first of all, I'm not here as a lawyer for anybody. I'm not representing anybody. I am a lawyer. And I did not do extensive legal research as a member of the committee. I'm a spokesperson today for the committee. I'm a member of the committee. I did do research primarily on practical and factual considerations regarding noise enforcement. And a lot of other committee members also did research. And we all got together. I'd say there's about 20 members, active members on the committee. We received feedback from a number of residents throughout Corrales. We actually received feedback, surprisingly, from patrons of businesses in Corrales. And so there's an amalgam of information that's coming forward in this presentation. And if you could, Melanie, switch to the next slide. I mean, this slide shows why we're here. And I think we're all here because there's been recent issues regarding excessive noise in the village. Our committee has been tracking, we call this the noise map. Residents and business owners report that they're experiencing excessive noise recently. And I'll say it's not just, and this map actually doesn't include, there's some red dots further to the west than I could scan on my scanner at my office for this presentation. It doesn't just show excessive noise perceptions by residents in Corrales of just from the main Corrales Road core. There's isolated incidents of other sorts of noise that are occurring from other properties for different reasons. And some are events and some are other issues. But I just want to highlight here that it's not just what's occurring along the main core of Corrales Road. And it's not just the noise that's being experienced due to amplified sound. So there are folks that are telling us that, yes, they're having experiences with excessive noise in the village. And here's some input that we've received. I will say nobody's names attributed to this input. We were requested not to attribute names. And I'll tell you something that has become very clear to me. In some respects, this is almost like a popularity issue. There are certain folks that are experiencing a lot of excessive noise, but their numbers are low. And the rest of the village enjoys certain activities that are occurring within Corrales. And so if you're going to just do the scale on who's really impacted, the numbers are low on the impact side. Versus maybe the vote for certain activities within the village. So I just want to say that. One thing that the committee was really aware of and we looked closely at is if you look at the zone map for Corrales, there is no commercial use that does not border a residence in Corrales. We are not like Albuquerque. We're not like Rio Rancho. We don't have, packed, condensed density commercial zones. We don't have industrial zones. Interestingly, in a lot of cities across the United States, breweries go in industrial zones. They're a producer of a commodity, I guess. They have industrial noises. And if you look at other cities like Denver and other places, breweries are really they go into the industrial zones. That's kind of cool too, right? Because they have that modern look. And so in Corrales, we are a mixed use. We have some mixed uses, but most of those uses, municipal zone properties, commercial properties, are bordered by residential properties. And we really couldn't find an exception to that within Corrales. So the way the committee discussed this issue is that we really don't have an isolated area that's disconnected from residential that would fall within a separate category for noise. And we really do view that the noise ordinances in Corrales are really at the residential level, that they should be at the residential level for noise. You can see here, some folks are talking about walking dogs down by the clear ditch and they can clearly hear words to music, to amplified music. Some folks live by Old Church and they're experiencing excessive noise due to an event center or events that are happening in their neighborhood and they can't sleep. Somebody that we talked to in a professional office on Corrales Road says they work late and they've noticed that some of the noise is becoming distracting at night. An employee of a restaurant that has a patio said they've had patrons asked to be moved off the patio because of another business's noise. And I will tell you the patron issue, we got some comments on the patron issue. They weren't necessarily residents of Corrales, but they were also experiencing noise on patios that they used to go eat at that they don't really enjoy outside anymore during certain hours. And then, of course, residents that enjoy eating on their own patio at their own home. The second slide shows some other input that we've had. Some of this input was forwarded to us because it was written already to counselors and counselor emails or other letters. So I will acknowledge that some of this you've probably seen before. One that I know hasn't been provided to the council, I believe, is somebody who lives down off of somewhere to the east and near the Bosque area in an adobe home where his adobe walls are pretty thick and he's hearing noise indoors that's distracting during the evenings. And then one that I don't think you've heard before is there's a couple of businesses near another resident's home that he feels constant loud banging and HVAC noises from that business. So what all of this just shows is some of the input that we've received and I'll tell you, we didn't advertise, we didn't say we're a committee, we're looking at this issue, but through the village minutes and through these meetings, folks just contacted us. These weren't necessarily committee members, but some are. And I do want to say that there is a feeling of not wanting to be public because of just some of the vitriol that's been going on. So I will say that. I will let other people, if they want to say who they are, they can tell you who they are. But we decided not to quote who these input providers are. So what do Corrales residents want? Melanie, if you can go to the next slide, please. This is just from the draft comprehensive plan. Corrales residents, according to the draft comprehensive plan, want to protect the village from noise pollution. And the residents want minimum noise and visual pollution. And why does noise pollution matter? If you could switch, Melanie, thank you. One thing that I think, one thing I've noticed, this is Tessa personally, not the committee, is that some of the stuff that's going on right now in the village is being considered as almost like a nuisance, like a pesky issue. Something that people don't want to be bothered with. But, you know, noise pollution is more than just a nuisance issue. It's a health risk. And the EPA since the 70s in passing the Noise Prevention Act did acknowledge that it is a growing risk to the population. It's second in damage or second in harm to public health from air pollution. I don't know if you know, but there's a recent lawsuit right now by a group called quietcommunities.org against the EPA to force it to start enforcing its noise pollution regulations. And there's a lot of information, and I've done a lot of factual personally research on this issue because I'm not a noise or municipal lawyer. I'm a water lawyer. But I was shocked. I was shocked at how many communities are dealing with the exact same thing that Corrales is dealing with right now. And the importance that noise pollution does present to communities. There's a lot, I gave you some sources below, but these issues on this slide right here come from Harvard Medical, Harvard Medicine, and other sources are the EPA, World Health Organization, and other sources. I personally called panel members on Quiet Communities, the legal panel, and on the technical panel to get just more educated. There's a lot of resources out there for the Village of Corrales. Randy, I'm sure you've yes, sorry. Just making sure it was you, Randy. Sorry, you're very blurry. That are available to the village on enforcement kind of standards and other things. So we did a lot of factual research. I didn't approach this issue as if I was writing a legal brief and like how the village could withstand a legal challenge, because you have competent legal counsel. But there's a lot of information out there and a lot of work that's been done by nonprofits on these very same issues. I want to now just kind of briefly talk about the history of regulating excessive noise in Corrales. The current ordinance we have right now, the main provisions that are kind of at issue were adopted in 1987. And that was after a number of years. You guys probably know some of this history of fighting issues with the territorial house. There was a draft ordinance at the time that there was a really good lawyer. Do you know I live in his house, Joe Lang's house? I live in Joe Lang's house. So Joe Lang, I know, isn't that crazy? I didn't realize he was the lawyer for all of this, but he represented the territorial house and he was really good. He was a really good lawyer and he found cracks and ways to fight the village on enforcement of the noise ordinance. It eventually resolved that the village did pass an ordinance and it did adopt some excessive noise standards. I won't exactly read verbatim what the noise standard is in the village right now, but suffice to say, it does have some problems with vagueness and unenforceability. And I think there's some pending issues going on right now. And I think there's some opinions that perhaps the standard is unenforceable due to vagueness. There was a proposed ordinance in 2009. I believe legal counsel at the time presented it to the village council. And it was incredibly long. I think it was like 15 pages long. I looked at it. Very, very detailed. I think it probably would have withstood legal challenges, but to enforce it was very difficult. It was very, very technical and had lots of definitions. And I think the council was worried. It was like almost jumping from something simple to very, very complicated. Ultimately, it wasn't adopted. And then we have the current proposal today that I think has caused this conversation, which adds a new exemption for amplified commercial noise during daytime hours. I want to point out something very interesting that I ran across. So this is Tessa only. This was not the committee. In looking at what's going on right now, the big issue with amplified noise in the commercial zone, neighborhood commercial zone. One thing I ran across is it seems to me that the current liquor location requirements don't even allow serving and selling liquor outside the premises of an establishment. So the way our noise ordinance is being enforced in a certain environment is not even contemplated as a land use under the village code. And this was interesting because I was like, is this really the current version? And I'm taking this off the municipal code. It's section 43, 4-31, that says it shall be unlawful for any establishment to serve or sell liquor in any manner outside of the building on the premises at which such business is operated. I'm only raising this issue because I ran across it accidentally. And it does put into context, we're trying to enforce the noise ordinance in the context of something that's not even a land use that's allowed. And I'm just raising that issue that I stumbled upon this. And it does highlight, I think, where we are. Like what we can think of establishments that are doing this, right? And I remember when I first moved to Corrales, I'd go to Village Pizza and they'd make you go to the counter to get your liquor. I don't know if you guys remember that. They'd say, we can sell you a beer or wine, but you have to come and get it and then you could take it outside. They wouldn't serve you outside. And I'm just raising this issue for you to show that I don't know if we really know what we're doing right now with this issue. Next slide, Melanie, please. The one thing that our committee was really interested in doing, and I think when I first showed up in front of you, is that we were really interested in finding a standard that is legally enforceable, because I will tell you some of the research that we looked at, well, most of the research we looked at is when you enforce noise ordinances, you control noise pollution. It requires an enforcement aspect. Hoping that it doesn't happen in several communities and trying to work proactively on noise issues really hasn't been effective in several. And I want to say, Randy, if you want any of my research, I will give you a Dropbox and I can give you everything we've looked at. But this is coming from just looking at factual situations in other communities. I think, I can't remember who on the council recommended plainly audible. I'm sorry, I just don't. Oh,
Yeah.
Councilor Murray, sorry.
Even I forget.
Yes, I'm sorry. And you're very blurry right now. So we did look at that because it had been something that was presented. And actually, I know that some folks felt that it's too vague. What is plainly audible? Essentially, plainly audible means it's a noise that is subject and heard to a person with normal hearing. And then I think in some of the challenges that I saw across the country, it's like, well, it's people's hearing varies, right? Some of us don't hear so well. Some of us hear better. Little kids probably hear perfectly. So in looking at that standard that's used, and it's used throughout the country, it is not that it's not used. The way certain communities find it enforceable is if it's more than one person. So you have evidence of a plainly audible standard. And usually those communities, when they're legally challenged, if it's more than one person, it can be the property owner or the enforcement officer that decides that and attests or swears that it was plainly audible. Usually the plainly audible standard is applied at the receiving end of an excessive noise. So if, for example, there's something going on and there's a complaint, the enforcement officer or the property owner would say, I can hear it inside my house or outside my house. Usually it's enforced and defined as a distance from the sound emitting property. And Subjectivity, like I said, is minimized by requiring more than one observer or complaining receiver. So it's not that it's not unenforceable or that it's too vague to be enforced. There's several communities around the country and lawsuits that have upheld the plainly audible standard. Another one that is it's becoming, I would say, more the norm than the exception are decibel levels. There's been a lot of litigation since 1987 when our noise ordinance was passed on kind of the more vague standard and the unenforceability challenges that have really led to more scientific types of standards for noise. And these are maximum decibel levels. And these tend to work, but in just my very cursory review of case law, these tend to work best when they are applied at the emitting side of the noise, not the receiving side of the noise, just because of the way sound travels. So it appears that decibel level readings work best at the property line of the sound emitter. And these are also used in ordinances around the country. They require reliable equipment and competent operators, and they're usually in ordinances. Some ordinances don't make a distinction between different types of weighted decibel levels, and I'm not an expert on this, but a lot of ordinances have two types of decibel readings. One are A-weighted readings and C-weighted readings, and it's due to the type of frequency of sound that is being heard. Now, I know the idea of somebody using a decibel reader and how complicated that could be and where that puts the village is a concern. I'll tell you, I think, what's the name? I think it was Larson Davis. I called a distributor or a manufacturer of decibel readers made for entities that need to enforce noise ordinances. I think it was Larson Davis, called him and said, you know, what do you guys see? How hard are these to use? And I had a really good chat with a fellow there just to try and understand like what level of training do you need? And according to them, that's very little. But I do think that that's something that the village could take a look at and try and figure out, you know, really how difficult is this? What kind of training would we need? I know that if you can go to the next slide, Melanie, please. We took a look at, you know, we don't live in isolation here on an island in Corrales, but we did take a look at how our neighbors regulate unlawful noise. And Rio Rancho, Bernalillo, Los Ranchos, and City of Albuquerque all have decibel readings. They all do. I think over time, it's just been almost required that entities, governmental entities, move to something that's more of a standard and scientific standard that's acceptable by courts as far as evidence. Rio Rancho just went through an entire year of reviewing a new noise ordinance. It took them a very long time and they worked very hard at it. Apparently, from my discussions, it's working. And this is another aspect of when you have enforcement, you do tend to get compliance. And almost once you have a place to enforce, noise violations stop. You know, once people know like where they have to live and that there's possible enforcement, people start complying. So one thing I think is really important to understand is that not every entity uses decibel levels the same way. Rio Rancho measures them at the source of sound. They require a persistent or continuously noise for 10 minutes. And they have decibel readings. And these decibel readings that I have there are 55, 60 are the differences between the A and the C readings. So usually you'll have a 5-level decibel difference between the two A and C readings. They do have a residential category and then an office neighborhood category, but you can see that the readings range from 55 to 65 on the A level during the daytime, and then 60 to 70 on the A level in those two different zones. Bernalillo has a decibel level and it's measured at the receptor premises. So at the place that's experiencing the noise. Its level is 50 decibels above the ambient noise level. at a resident receptor premises or is plainly audible in any dwelling during 10 PM to 7 AM. So they use both. And that's really important. And I think the thing that the committee realized is that a lot of ordinances use a at the source standard and at a receiving end standard. And you can see why. Sound travels differently, and I'm not a technical expert on this, but you can have a lot of barriers to sound coming to one property and then a sound cone to another. And reading it at the source and reading it at the receptor premises, having both standards, I think is probably easier and fairer to apply according to a lot of the ordinances that we looked at. Los Ranchos, all zoned property uses are measured at the source of sound, and they cannot exceed 50 decibels during the daytime, and at nighttime 40 decibels. And I didn't go over the decibel level readings. You know, I can't, let me go back to that. Conversation generally is within the 60 decibel range. And you think conversation, that's not noise, you know, that's not loud. But if I'm sitting in your bedroom and I'm going, hey, how's it going, Counselor Miera? You want to go to sleep? Well, I want to talk about my day. And it was really great. And, you know, I was doing this and this and this. I mean, listening to a voice talk to you when you want to sleep is loud. It's loud. Conversation is loud when you want a peaceful session in your home. So I do feel like sometimes we say, as far as ear and auditory damage, it's closer in the 80 decibel range. But as far as interrupting your peace and enjoyment at your home, really around the 50 to 60 range is what most ordinances try and prevent somebody having to experience in their home. So going back to the neighbors, City of Albuquerque measures at the source of reception. So really crazy. Rio Rancho has the same level, has the same numbers as the City of Albuquerque. Rio Rancho measures at the source of emitting noise, and Albuquerque measures at the source of receiving. I thought that was really interesting. Next, our goals. So I think when I first told you that there were a bunch of citizens and folks that were approaching me and talking about the noise issue, it's the same goal that I talked to you about initially, is that there's a group of residents in this village that want meaningful and enforceable noise standards. Research clearly shows that enforcement results in reduced noise pollution. And we understand that in order to be legally enforceable, they have to be specific, not vague, and they must meet evidentiary requirements in the event that there's a legal action to enforce. We also recognize that we live in a village where we'd rather work with our neighbors, and we'd rather work on things that are conducive to good neighborly relations. And so we also recognize the need to come up with fix it first requirements, not only finite remedies. And so what we have discussed is perhaps incorporating noise evaluations within the site plan process to require proactive measures to prevent excessive noise. We also think that there could be an ordinance that requires certain noise activities to obtain a permit from the village, which currently temporary private event is required for, you need a permit for temporary private events. And then employ complaint procedures that encourage direct contact with commercial zone producers. So I will tell you, as a result of our meetings, there are some items of consensus within the committee. First item of consensus is that P&Z site plan processes should specifically include sound and excessive noise considerations of a proposed land use. Right now, I think, and somebody please correct me, but I understand that there's a question of, does this proposed use will it impact neighbors? There's a lot of ways a proposed land use can impact neighbors, but we would recommend that P&Z actually look at noise as a separate issue, especially since it is identified as a second level health risk as in relation to air pollution by the EPA. Excessive noise standards should be uniformly applied throughout the village, regardless of zone property uses. And this goes again to the fact that we have municipal zone, commercial zone adjacent to residential zone. And I do want to say that we have general areas within the village that qualify for commercial zoning, right? I used to own the old farm stand property. We got the first half acre zone commercial, but we wanted the back acre agricultural so we could continue farming. It all qualified for commercial, but that doesn't mean that's the way it was zoned. And just because it's within an area that can be zoned commercial doesn't mean those properties are like deemed commercial. You still have residential uses. And zoning isn't really like applicable to what a particular property is being used as. So we really don't view the noise ordinance issue as an area applicable issue. It's particular land uses, even though they're zone commercial, they're right next to a residential. So we do not see any real need to have different levels of noise as far as what a sound emitting property is. Everything's adjacent to residential. There may be a day that all the areas that are qualified for commercial are, but it's not yet. And there's a lot of old neighbors and residents in this main commercial use area that have lived here for a long time. And I think the village needs to acknowledge that we don't really have a commercial zone. It's a neighborhood commercial use area. And then, of course, traditional exemptions for specific uses such as agricultural livestock should remain in place. And the consensus of the committee is that outdoor amplified sound should not be allowed, and with the exception of a temporary noise permitting process. So we do, we're not trying to write an ordinance, but we thought it would be helpful to give you all an idea of how we would see the issue of noise standards possibly playing and going forth in an ordinance. Of course, we're not trying to draft the ordinance, but we did focus on what are enforceable standards and possibly what would be workable within the village. First of all, we do believe that the village should adopt an ordinance that defines what excessive noise is and use that standard for daytime hours and nighttime hours, consistent with all of our neighbors. And all of the other entities that can and have been enforcing noise standards for excessive noise. We would recommend the adoption of a general standard first. And that general standard would be a plainly audible standard at the receptor side with a certain distance within certain time periods. And you can see the language here. At a distance of 50 feet or more from the property line of the source of the sound during daytime hours, and perhaps a 25 feet or more from the property line of the source of the sound during nighttime hours. A sound that persists for a duration of more than 5 minutes and interferes with the comfort, repose, health, or safety of others. Prima facie evidence, and I know this is lawyer speak, but a lot of these ordinances have this provision, so that the municipal judge can say, okay, the village council and the legislator of the village said that if I have this evidence, it's prima facie, and that means it establishes a violation, and then the violator could come in and try and rebut that evidence, essentially is what it is. But you're not fighting about whether or not it meets a legal standard for evidentiary proof. So lots of municipalities and villages use a prima facie evidence standard. And for example, this is just an example, at least 2 separate property owners or property owner and enforcement officer attest that a sound is plainly audible in accordance with the definition. Then on the dual side, a specific standard. And this would be applicable in all areas of the village. We would recommend that it be standard for all areas. Noise levels shall not exceed a certain decibel definition at the property line of the sound emitting property during daytime hours and a certain decibel level during nighttime hours. That range that I provide you all is the range that's within all of our surrounding neighbors. Okay, so it's not like we just pulled it out of the blue. It's Los Ranchos, Albuquerque, Bernalillo, and which one?
Rio Rancho.
Rio Rancho, thank you. And I think they're at A level or C level, I'm not quite sure. But what we're trying to say is our neighbors are able to do this. We should be able to do this. We're not asking for something unreasonable. It's what and these are bigger communities. Maybe Los Ranchos has very, very low decibel levels, but I think it's just something that should be discussed by the council or considered by staff as to, and the village and the residents as to what's reasonable. Then we would recommend provisions specifically for amplified sound for businesses. And this would be a permitting requirement. If a business operation on a commercially zoned premise desires, and this is some of the language that was already used in the staff recommendation, to employ a sound amplifier or device for the production or reproduction of sound or music for entertainment purposes, it must obtain a permit from the village. During daytime hours, it will not exceed blah at the property line of the business producing the sound. We would recommend it be the same level that's applied in all areas. And then no amplified sound shall be played by businesses during nighttime hours. And that's consistent with the current exemption nighttime. And this is just to reflect that there's a common time where people want to sleep and they want to sleep in quiet. And we just don't see the need for amplified music to be played next to residents during sleeping nighttime hours. The next slide. So this is just an example of what the village could do. The village could have a permit application for amplified sound. And it could say, applicant, you're required to show us what you're going to do to soundproof. You could demonstrate to us soundproofing measures such as insulated walls, sound dampening panels, low noise equipment to minimize the impact on neighboring residents, and a sound management plan. How are you going to manage vibrations for big bass booming and other things? And it would be something that would be part of the application process that could be considered before a permit is issued. And then finally, Melanie, we would recommend community liaisons for businesses so that businesses that have a permit to play amplified sound and including businesses who have patrons, customers, or practices that generate outdoor sounds are required to designate a contact person for noise-related issues. And this goes to the mayor's suggestion that, you know, the first step is to have people contact the business directly and say, hey, you know, I can't sleep. This is really, really loud. What's going on? And there's somebody that's direct, that's designated to deal with these issues. And that person is also encouraged to work with residents to establish voluntary noise reduction practices. Finally, our suggestions regarding other ordinance provisions would be for permits for private events limited to 2 permits per year. I don't know if that's in the current ordinance. I know it was in the 2009 recommendation. And then the standard provisions and allowances for safety, emergency vehicles, and all the other things that we allow because it's necessary to allow. We're really just focused on developing some sort of enforceable standard in our recommendations in general for all areas of the village. And then finally, enforcement and penalties strong enough to encourage compliance. As a lawyer, I'm going to say I think it's better to not have a misdemeanor attached to this, but more of a civil fine, because civil burdens of proof are less than criminal burdens of proof. So I would suggest a civil sort of fining situation or injunction, because it's just easier for the village to be able to enforce. And perhaps like a scaling, you know, first violation, second violation, third violation increases. And that's just Tessa comments, but I would suggest a civil situation, not a criminal situation. And finally, I just thought this was a hilarious cartoon, because it's a guy saying, I've been lying in bed admiring your music system. Can I take a peek at it, with a sledgehammer behind his back? Because I think that's how some residents do feel. I feel also, I just want to say that a lot of folks, I think the comments that we've received are that they're frustrated and it's loud and they think, well, maybe next weekend won't be this way. And I will say that there is reluctance. It's almost like a learned helplessness. They're just like, you know, it's just not going to make a difference. And I do think that they look to the council to help the minority of residents that are suffering the most noise impact in the village. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Mira.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask two things from me. First of all, just to ask a quick question. And they're just getting ready to leave, and I was just gonna say, before we move to the next one, if you would allow the gentleman to please use your
Gavel.
gavel and move us to the next order of business, if you would be so kind as to help us do that, sir. Could you do that, Mr. Mayor?
How about this guy?
This guy right
All
there.
right, that is not a sledgehammer. And we don't have.
You be firm but gentle.
Right, the next order of business. Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amazing how they'll remember that. They should put on camera anyway. May I have a quick question, sir?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all right. It's okay if you ask your question.
Yeah, and it'll be quick.
Yes.
Just a clarification. On your committee suggestions on the second to the last one, you talked about having a permit. You're suggesting having a permit for those businesses. But prior to that, you had about a permit about doing it in a house. Is that a permanent house that was temporary?
Yeah.
Are these businesses that you're talking about with the permit, is that not temporary, that is ongoing?
Yes, I
Oh.
think that would be the idea. If it's a business that as part of its operations wants to employ amplified sound for entertainment purposes, that they're, we had a lot of discussion about this, Counselor. I think there's ways to bring the noise issue into the proactive site plan process, right? So, but also whether that would be at the P and Z level or whether there'd be a separate permitting process, I don't know. Because there are some folks that would need to do a site plan. But our proposal would be, yeah, that a business would have to make proactive demonstrations before they could use amplified sound for entertainment purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick questions, Tessa. First, is it at the receptor or is it at the origin that you're stressing?
Well, so the standards, and I'm sorry if I didn't make this clear, but the plainly audible standard would be at the receptor side. So I'll give you
Right.
an example. There's something going on, right? Loud noise. And somebody's complaining, and there would be a way for the village to either look at whether it's plainly audible, that whether two people can say it's plainly audible and it's 5 minutes or long. I'm not trying to say what the village has to say, but this is just an example. It's plainly audible at the receptor side, or it violates the decibel reading at the emitting side. So it would be two ways to determine whether or not there's excessive noise going on.
Great.
Either one.
And the second one is, and this was brought up before, the hours that you cite. You have daytime hours from 7 in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, or 10 o'clock. That was expanded daytime hours, and then from 10 o'clock to 7. It seems to me that we had this discussion actually during our cannabis discussion, in terms of operation of a business. 10 o'clock at night, it seems to me is not daytime. I don't know if there was discussion in the committee or not.
Well, interesting question. And you saw everything was, for example, right? A lot of ordinances just do daytime, nighttime. There are some ordinances that do daytime up till 8 o'clock, evening hours, 8 to 10, and then nighttime.
Nighttime.
So there's a smorgasbord
Okay.
for how to define
Yeah.
hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Council Murray?
Thank you. Thank you, Tessa. I think this is some very good information. Living at the south end of the village, our house has experienced this noise, but it's coming from Albuquerque more than anything. But we also have vehicle noise, motorcycles, vehicles without exhaust, so forth. And it is irritating, like you say. You're up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, we're hoot owls, basically. We're up late anyway, but when the Salt Yard West was really going at it, we could hear them. They were over a mile away, and yet we could hear it in our house. Now, the problem is, in the summertime, we like to open the house up. You have the windows open, the doors open, and so forth. One thing I did find with Salt Yard was when I went over and looked at the facility, they had a garage door in the bar area that was facing our direction. And when it was up, the noise came out. I mean, it was just literally loud. So I don't have a problem with noise within the building as long as the doors and windows are shut. I think that's a very good, way to do things, keep it there. But when you move outside, I've also noticed in restaurants that we're all getting louder. We all talk louder, and the noise just kind of ramps up because, we can't hear my neighbor because the other tables they're talking louder than we are. So I have to talk to Mr. Burkett over here raise my voice and so forth. But I'm just making a comment that, yes, we do need standards within the village and they need to be enforceable. Now, one of the things that you did say that I read was you would say the receptor and the enforcement officer. There could be a discretion between the two about what they consider acceptable or not. I don't know how we resolve that.
Yeah, and I think different communities do it differently, but they do acknowledge that one person may have a different level of hearing standards, so that if there's two people that can attest and swear, then that establishes like an evidentiary standard. I mean, there's a lot, these are just examples. There's a lot of different ways communities deal with that issue, how to show something's plainly audible. But some communities, and it's been upheld in courts and challenges, that if there's two independent people, not related, not in the same home, two independent property owners or an enforcement owner or property owner, there could be four, right? But at a minimum two, that would meet a certain evidentiary standard.
Thank you.
Councilor Alsobrook.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on Councilor Murray's mentioning of the salt yard, which I think is a very good example of very poor behavior by a noise generator. On the other side of the spectrum is what Boxing Bear was able to do while they were still in business. They responded, and at first they were a little recalcitrant, but they did respond and work with the neighbors who were impacted and tried different fencing materials, different wall materials, until they found something that could work for them and kept the noise to a level that was okay with the residents. So I agree with you that the first step is the community relation approach of going to the proprietors, the owners, the managers, and saying, you make a lot of noise and it makes my life miserable. Let's work on something. And then, of course, that has to get backed up, I think, with an ordinance that's enforceable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Burkett.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was a very helpful presentation. I just want to be clear. So you said commercial and residential, since they are directly abutting each other almost everywhere in the village, that they would be treated the same. Because I have concerns. My kids, I guarantee, are over 65 decibels for more than 10 minutes, about 90% of the time if they're awake. I know people driving down my street have amplified music that's well above that. So that would be outside amplified music. We are looking at doing exceptions for farming, for agriculture, for a variety of different things. And so I'm confused how we talk about having these general things, but really it's all very targeted at one thing. It's amplified music on patios, and how we're not protecting the neighbors from the harm of my kids' noise or the school noise or motorcycle noise or all these other noises that are constantly happening in the village. So I would be curious your thought on how we, I guess, fairly enforce all noises without specifically targeting certain noises.
Yeah, and with all due respect, I disagree. I do believe that it would be all noises. If your kids are screaming at a decibel level of 65 decibels at your property line, and it's plainly audible to a neighbor, I think that's a problem.
So 60 is a normal conversation, correct?
It is, but if your kids are sitting in your backyard, decibels like half in distance, the distance that a decibel level is occurring where your kids are. If your kids are sitting at the fence screaming over at a neighbor at 65 or talking at a neighbor at 65 and it's bothering them for 5 continuous minutes, it would violate the ordinance. We're not trying to distinguish sounds. If your neighbor is playing amplified music that is plainly audible and disturbing during certain hours and the restrictions, yeah, it would be enforceable. This is an attempt to not distinguish between different types of music. I mean, different types of sound, I'm sorry. The only thing that is specific to businesses playing amplified music for entertainment purposes is that they get a permit. There is no distinction as to sound levels. It's uniformly applied to all sounds. There will be, we do recognize that this is an agricultural community and that there are historic exemptions for certain activities for agriculture and other things. Construction, most construction noise requires a permit in other communities. So, you know, we're not trying to be unreasonable as to day-to-day activities, but it's just holding an amplified entertainment music use within an area adjacent to residents to the same level that everybody else is held to in the village. So I actually view it as not prejudicial. It's the same standard that's going to be applied to everybody for every type of use.
Is mowing my lawn considered agricultural?
You know, mowing your lawn, I think there are some areas in here that talk about landscaping and temporary uses. So, I mean, these are the types of issues that would be in the exemption in the standard and allowance section that are already in the village ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And I think you have to ask your neighbor, is it okay if I mow my lawn? I'll let you mow your lawn if you let me mow my lawn.
Do you
I'm-
really think that's a conversation I should have?
Yeah, I do. If
Okay.
your neighbor's
You know, I am-
bothered by noise,
I am
if your
glad
neighbor's bothered by
different neighbors.
noise, then I think you need to have that conversation. Yes.
It doesn't work with my neighbor. Let me know how it turns out.
Any other yes, Counselor Knight.
You know, at the beginning of your presentation,
Microphone, can you get your, pull it over? Yeah, there you go.
at the beginning of your presentation, you talked about how it was impacting a small group of people.
Mhm.
And we represent districts in the village that are large.
Mhm.
So I understand and obviously the people that have come up here numerous times in front of this council over the last few months probably are the people that were on your committee.
They weren't, there was, I can tell you that if you want to know the general makeup of the committee, I can tell you what areas of the village they came from and what interests they represented.
Great. Can you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, there were a number of folks that had very distinct, unique interests with sound in their particular neighborhoods. And you can look at the sound map. It's not all from just the Corrales Corps. And when I talked about the limited number of people who are experiencing excessive noise, yeah, not everybody in the village lives or has been living for 30 or 40 years along Corrales Road that have to suffer this noise. Folks that are in beautiful, serene, quiet areas are protected. They're not concerned. They do go to these establishments that are causing this excessive noise. And because they enjoy those establishments, that's why I said it's like a popularity contest. And it's like, if you're not experiencing excessive noise, you're not going to necessarily be involved in this. You don't really have a dog in the game, right? And I don't know where you live, Counselor Knight, but I don't know if you experience excessive noise. But if you did, you certainly would be looking to the village to help protect you. And I think that's the troubling thing with this is having a beer, listening to outdoor amplified music, like a value that this village prioritizes over somebody who's 80 years old next door and has absolutely lost hope of having any sort of quiet in her home. And she's afraid. She's afraid to come out and talk to you all. She's afraid of vitriol and what's going on in the village. And all we're asking for is that the village acknowledge that this is going on to residents. It's happening to residents in the village. I personally, my property experiences some noise, not to the degree some other folks are experiencing. But I think that's what your job is. It's to provide health and safety for all residents, not just for the majority. It's for everybody.
Right, but to me, the majority is most people in the village, right?
But they're not experiencing noise. Most people in the village aren't experiencing noise. It's a numbers game. And so if you started experiencing noise next door to you, could we say, well, you're just one person that's experiencing that noise and you don't deserve protection from excessive noise?
I'm just saying this is a very difficult thing. And again, we've heard from numerous people over the last few months about this, and it's really difficult. And but people do live on a main highway in the commercial zone, which, you know, again, it's a residential in commercial zone. So it's difficult because I see faces nodding no at me, but you know, let's be realistic. There are people that have bought near the commercial zone and now it's like, well, I want to change it.
I would ask for you to provide me the statistics of the people who've bought in a commercial zone versus the residents that have been here for 50 and 20 to 50 years plus. To me, this is part of the To me, this is part of the semantics of what's going on here. I don't believe we have a commercial zone. I believe we have certain zoned properties for commercial uses that are mixed in a residential zone. And that's just a fact. You know, someday it may truly
Residential
be.
came first and then the commercial came in. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yeah, predominantly, yes. And if it would help the council, we can tell you the residents that live next to all of these little areas and how many years they've lived there. And whether or not these certain commercial uses even got a site plan for what they're doing, or even follow the liquor location requirements. I mean, this is the issue. It is a popularity contest, and I appreciate your comments because it is just a small group of people that are suffering on the backs of everybody else partying. And I just don't think that we're not asking you to make any exceptions, counselor, for amplified music. We're asking you to adopt standards that are adopted by our neighbors and that are uniformly applied. So I don't know really what else to say other than that.
Is there any type of time restraints that you talked about in your group?
Yes, they're in our suggestions, there are daytime and nighttime hour exceptions.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Alsobrook.
Thank you, Mayor. In your red dot map that shows where people have been complaining about, and all of those, can you give a rough guess of how many of those were nighttime oriented complaints as opposed to daytime?
I do know that the majority definitely are nighttime.
Okay.
And I do know that there was one particular that's just constant
Okay.
daytime, nighttime,
Oh, okay.
but I don't know, frankly. I do think they're predominantly majority nighttime.
And in the, and so you mentioned our very close by neighbors, Bernalillo, Rio Rancho, and Los Ranchos. In any of the other communities where they have noise ordinances, do you know if, you know, do you know if they have similar mixed use areas? And you know, our district here, our commercial district is an unusual mixed use area because most modern mixed use by design areas have ground floor, retail, restaurants, etc., residents above. And this one's different. This is dedicated properties side by side. Did you come across many of
No,
those?
we're very unique, honestly. I think Los Ranchos is closer, you know, but if you want to go down to a 40 decibel level, that's low. You know, I do, I mean, I think they're the closest. But yeah, we are very unique. And I looked at, if you all do want to see all the sample ordinances, I looked at Pine Top, Arizona, you know, I looked at I looked at Taos. Yeah, there's a lot, there's this many different types of decibel levels for different communities in different areas. I think what was illustrative for our committee is just like what goes on, what do residents and others get to rely on as a resident in these other communities for quiet enjoyment on their properties. And yes, Corrales may eventually morph into a solid commercial use zone. It's not that now. And I feel like the council needs to recognize that this truly is a residential use community with commercial uses spotted and municipal uses spotted in this mixed use zone. And I think that's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Well, and just one last question. Did any of them ever incorporate densities? I mean, for instance, we have a fairly compact area where there are a lot of nighttime noise generators with amplified music now. If they were, you know, spread out quite a bit more, I don't know if that would impact fewer people or not. I'm just curious about if anything you came across addressed those sorts of issues.
No, I didn't really see density as an issue or a consideration in the ordinances.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Tessa, thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
This was
and
very informative.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
What's our next step on this?
Well, we have to try to take some of this information that Tessa has given us and perhaps pass it on to Randy and look at what we have already. Because it seems like at one time, John, remind me, do you remember us ever talking about a commercial overlay? That anybody who lived in this area could become commercial? And then how do you deal with the situation of the school? Because a number of people have complained about the school noise. And because they don't like all the noise of laughing children. And so how do you deal with those situations? I mean, so anyway, so I think we have to work through it all and see what kind of suggestions we get and what we find.
Thank you.
It's all a matter of information, data. Anybody else? Okay, so we'll move on. And now we'll hear from the old dog balloonist himself, our
Thank you.
administrator.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Couple of things before I go to Tanya. As many of you may know, the village itself, when the snowstorm hit, we suffered a complete meltdown of our internet, and it required the principal and 2 or 3 other people from our servicer to come out and spend the weekend rebuilding it. And so it's rebuilt mostly. I know we're still having problems today, intermittent problems with phones and other items. So bear with us on that. We've taken, and I'm sure you'll hear more of this through the evening, but we've taken dozens, if not hundreds of phone calls for people asking about trees and what we're doing. And as you can see, they're being picked up, but we continue to try to find ways to make it easier for residents to move their trees from their yards onto the right of way of the street. And we're still working on ways to do that so they can get picked up. And now we have cleanup day coming on the 23rd of this month, but we also realize that there are a lot of residents that don't have the ability to haul things from their property. So we're working on that as arduously as we can to make that happen, but stay tuned. The other thing I wanted to report on October 31st, we lost 2 employees. One was Robert Pearson, who left planning and zoning. He was a permit assistant to Lori and Sherry and Ryan. And then also on October 31st was the last day of Rena Aragon. Our finance director left. And so we are in the process of reorganizing, and we're about 70% there. And I'll have more news for you on that as we move forward. But we intend to be fully staffed in the finance area. We have, obviously, we have staffing there. We have been working with our auditors, and we also have a temporary person that had been helping Rena in there. And so that person has been helping us. We completed the audit prior to Rena's leaving. And at this point, there has been no callbacks from the auditor to asking for more information, which we're pleased with. She worked very diligently in the last 10 days of her service here to make sure that the audit was done and complete with the auditor. But she also is available to us as we move through the next several months if we have any questions. And so she's been very gracious about that. But I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of those changes going on before. Tanya, you're up.
Hello, thank you, Mayor, Council, Administrator Curry. So let's start off with COVID. I believe we're going to be seeing a spike here in the village pretty soon. Based on people I know who have COVID and phone calls I've been receiving. But as of 10/31, lab tested cases for the last 7 days prior were 524 for roughly 25 per 100,000. Once again, that's lab tested only. Most people are, unless they're really sick or need a note from work or doing home tests. We have a 9% positivity rate in New Mexico. Sandoval County's positivity rate is 9.71%. The main variants in New Mexico are KP3, KP 3.1.1, and LB1. They're all Omicron derived variants. For October, the state website has Albuquerque and Rio Rancho wastewater increasing. However, if I go to the national map, Rio Rancho hasn't reported since mid October. So I'm not sure about that one, but the other ones are, and I'll cover more of that when I get to wastewater. CDC shows Rio Rancho not reported, decreasing in Santa Fe, and was previously, and it now looks like Santa Fe and Albuquerque both are increasing. Deaths for the week ending of 9/28/24, because it takes a while for them to process deaths nationwide, were below 1,000 at 950 people lost in that week. We've been at 16 continual weeks above 500 deaths in the United States due to COVID. Hospitalizations from 9/28 to 9/11 in New Mexico, the cumulative rate, because we started tracking again November 1st, people over 75, 96 per 100,000. The next group is 65 to 74, 22 per 100,000. In the US, ending 11/24, positivity rate was 4.8, which is down from 5, which is good. Discharge diagnosis, when you leave an emergency room, was down from 0.6% to 0.5%. And hospitalizations were down to 2 per 100,000 from 2.4. However, the deaths did increase a little bit. It went from 1.1 the week before to 1.2% of all deaths in the United States. Influenza is minimal in New Mexico, and minimal influenza A in our wastewater. However, we're starting to see an uptick in states, including Arizona. It's the only one close to us that has seen an uptick in flu cases. 23 other states are also seeing an uptick. Washington, D.C. is at high, and each level has, minimal has 3 levels, low has 3 levels, high has 3 levels. It's at the highest level of high. It's not to very high yet, which is what I'm saying on that is if you have not got your flu shot, go get it now. If you've not gotten your 24/25 COVID booster, it's also time to get that if you're expecting to do something, especially older relatives or in large groups for the holidays that are coming up. And anyone over the age of 65 can get a second 24/25 booster 6 months after their first. And people with certain immune compromising can get up to 3. Get with your doctor and see what they would suggest. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? John?
Tanya, do you have any updates about human bird flu cases or H5N1 here in New Mexico or anywhere nearby?
So H5N1, they're still tracking. I haven't seen any new updates of farms. We've got more going on in Washington and California. If you've been watching the news, Canada has a teenager who is critically ill. It's still suspected H5N1. They're waiting on the final test to come back, and they are not finding any connection right now to birds. He doesn't work at a poultry farm. He doesn't work with cows. So they're looking at that. So I'm kind of monitoring that on CIDRAP to see what it's going to come out as. We're still, I think, 35 to 40 confirmed cases of people, but they're really having trouble getting farm workers to want to test when they're feeling bad. And it's, luckily it has not done a recombinant event. I know that CDC and other infectious disease experts are hoping. We really want to control flu in farm workers, especially with cows, because bird flu is a 2-3 receptor, which goes, the only 2-3 receptor humans have is our eyes. So that's why a lot of people are showing with pink eye or pink eye type symptoms when they get bird flu. But cows in their udder have 2-6 receptors. So one of the things they're watching for is if a person has regular flu, the type we get, which is a 2-6 receptor, which is in our lungs where influenza attacks, and they get H5N1 and it does a recombination event, is it going to link to a 2-6 receptor, which would make it easier for us to get it and cause, respiratory problems. So I'm doing a lot of research and listening to a lot of epidemiologists, their podcasts, like Dr. Ulsterholm. And H5N1's been there for a while, so hopefully it doesn't happen, but the more cattle we have, and they monitor our the pig farms, they've been doing that for years to watch for those recombinant events. So I'm not too worried yet, but get your flu shot. Does that does that help, Counselor?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Counselor Murray.
Well, I mean, are we through with the Tanya's report, or can we comment?
Tanya, are you through?
As if I'm through, as long as you don't have any other questions, because Chief's gonna cover the other stuff. Thank you.
I noticed that our chief of fire department's not here tonight. Tanya, maybe you could answer this for me. And
He is online, Counselor Murray.
He'll give a report.
okay,
Yes, he is online.
Because he had tested positive for COVID.
yeah, I'm just through with the medical side of it. I just need some questions about the department.
He will give a report.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Mayor,
And Anthony will give a report coming up, and one of the things he probably won't mention is that he's 35 years old in the village today. His
He's actually older than 35.
But he's been with the village
He's been with the
35
village for
years.
35 years.
Happy Corrales birthday, Chief.
Yeah, yeah, he's actually just, 36.
So wanted to report that from Sky that we had so far this year, I mentioned last week, we had a number of business licenses. We have total so far this year, 194 new business licenses in Corrales, most of which are in the construction business. Either building homes or repairing roofs or things like that. Also, Councilor Woolman, to answer your question, we do have an architect budgeted in professional services, which is the same situation that we budget the attorney out of. And at this point in time, we have not called up any of the funds for that because we don't have any need for an architect at this time, but it is in the budget. So I wanted to follow up on that.
thank you.
The last thing I wanted to mention on a very, what I think is a very nice note, and, and I try to promote the library as much as possible because it's a wonderful library. And the Taos Pueblo has their group of young people that are performing around the state, and they're called the Aspen Song Kids, and they'll be performing in our library, actually in the band shell, hopefully, if we don't have snow on it or limbs. They'll be performing in our band shell on the 23rd at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I would encourage everybody to take advantage of that. It should be a really unique opportunity. And that's it.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Melanie, I noticed in your report, you said that you have some new software it's gonna help with IPRA requests.
Mhm.
Can you kind of go over that real quick?
Sure. So this is a Granicus product, like the software we use for the short-term rental compliance. And this will be an online system that should go live sometime in mid-December, beginning of January. And so this will have a link on our website. Anybody wanting to submit a request for public records will now do so through the portal. We'll still have paper copies of the forms available for residents who don't have access to a computer. You can still come into the village and ask for the form and fill it out just like you normally would. But for people who would like to just do it online, it'll be completely online. Your records will be sent to you online. You'll have, you'll sign up for a kind of like a membership in the portal. And then you can go in and see all of your requests and all of the responses. So you're not having to dig back through your emails and go, oh, when did I get that email from the clerk with this document? And it should cut down a lot. We have issues right now with when we send out responses to anybody with a Gmail account. As soon as we stick an attachment onto that email, it sends it to their spam folder. So we have to call every single requester that has a Gmail account, and I've started to notice it with Yahoo accounts as well. So we just call everybody now when we email them a document. And we tell them, you know, we just sent you your document. Please check your email. It's not there. Okay, check your spam folder. 90% of the time it is in their spam folder. So this will help cut down on that, hopefully, because it won't be coming from our email directly, which is part of the problem since we have a .org email. And then the Gmail, as soon as it sees an attachment from a .org, assumes that it's some sort of malware. But yeah, we're really excited about it. It will also have a section called trending topics where we can put, you know, like an update to the noise ordinance. We can keep the community informed and they can go click on that. They can sign up for alerts anytime we add new information to that post. They'll get an update. So we have one requester that sends in an IPA request for accident reports to the police department weekly. And so it's our plan to create a trending topic of accident reports. They'll all be redacted properly. So, you know, it's a public record. But so that person can go in and sign up for alerts. And every single time we put new accident reports in that trending topic, that person will get an email, and then that will cut down on probably 50 requests a year from our IPRAs that we, you know, our police department is already redacting those and sending those off to the state. So she'll just upload it to the software. So we're super excited.
Well, I know those are very time consuming. So anything that'll help both you and Sky get through those, that's great. Yeah.
Counselor Woolman?
Mayor, given what we all went through last week, I was just hoping we could send some major kudos out to Tanya, the fire department, and Public Works for all they did. We're not, I guess, totally there yet, but we're close, and they just did an amazing job.
Also,
Really appreciate it.
also, you know, we throw rocks at P&M frequently. P&M responded.
They were there.
They sent a crew out.
Yep.
And they were out here a long time. In fact, are they still out here, Melanie? Or is it a different group? Anyway, they were out here for like 30 hours straight, something really. And in fact, Anthony may talk about it when he gets online.
And I do have a question for Melanie, if I could. I noticed in the packet that there's no update from Parks and Rec Commission. Is there a reason for that? And I understand we're not getting them at all.
I had sent requests. I guess their secretary had missed a couple of meetings, and whoever was taking the minutes didn't send them over. I did talk to her this afternoon. They actually had a meeting today at 5:30, and they were going to approve all of the missing minutes. So hopefully I'll be getting an email with all of those tomorrow.
And do we know if they've been apprised of the updates, the conversation on Saucy Park? The commission?
That I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I would assume Lynn had shared discussions with them.
Yeah, I would think that Lynn would have said something, but I haven't talked to anybody on the committee.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, tonight was their first meeting since I think we had our discussion in council. So
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. So follow up with Councilor Woolman's about the power outage. Were any of the down trees and limbs, did they prohibit our first responders from ever responding to a call, emergency call?
Not as I'm aware. They answered 53 calls in 24 hours.
mhm.
So let's put it this way, does PNM do we have a contract with PNM to come in and trim these limbs on these power lines?
We have because they have a franchise here, we have a liaison, Deandra,
Mhm.
is that the lady we talked to? Who we can talk to specifically, call her up and she will take care of these issues with tree limbs. And in fact, we had a group come out some weeks ago, stopped at my house and said, we're going to cut some trees at your house. Well, they didn't get some of the really bad ones, but they got some. But
Yeah,
I
think
think
the
we
work,
have a better communication with them now.
yeah,
But it's
and I
taken
think the
a while.
work that started today or yesterday was pre-planned. So PNM had already planned to come in and cut trees. It's just the storm came in first and took down a lot
Well,
of stuff.
I mean, we've been talking about this for several months, and it seems to me that there's a little bit of preventive maintenance would have saved them a lot of money
Absolutely.
because.
We are working on a new franchise agreement with them, and we're trying to write in some vegetation management specifically in the franchise agreement. And I think Ken is working on that for
Okay,
us.
and I guess a question for Randy then, is P and M culpable for any blockage of, say, trees or limbs or anything like that, that might prevent a first responder from responding to an emergency call? I mean, are they liable for anything or are they immune?
I don't think there's any specific immunity. The issue would be notice. And, the problem with these big storms like this is there's no notice and everyone has to respond in an emergency fashion. So most people are protected from liability in those situations.
Well, it didn't Los Alamos, didn't they have somebody sue P and M or the power company up there because the power lines that ran through up to one of the mountain areas weren't trimmed?
Lawsuits can be filed over issues like that, but again, it's about notice. And
Okay.
did the utility have notice that this was a dangerous condition and so forth? It's kind of the same standard we are under.
Okay. And for the chief, I got a question for you. In your report, you indicate the number of citations given through to the, in the village. Are they mostly, again, residents or are they pass-throughs?
Council Murray, Mayor and Council, I don't have that information. We
Okay.
just tracked by types of violations. I believe the court is able to retrieve that information, but only by doing a hand search. There's no separate database for zip codes.
So, I mean, it just looked like there was 123 speeding tickets, but there's
Yeah.
also other citations. I was just curious if it's mostly us or is it?
I'm sorry, I can't tell you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. Oh, Mr. Curry, the tree committee reported that there were, I think it was the parking lot had 50% cross construction documents done. Who's paying for that?
This parking lot,
Yes.
we have a capital outlay. We also have money from the courts.
So we're paying for the construction documents.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So how much is the parking lot going to cost us now?
We have various estimates depending on how much we do ourselves, how much of the demo or scraping that we do ourselves. It can range anywhere from 400,000 to 600,000.
I've heard numbers up to 2 million. Is that true or not?
I think it could cost $2 million, but it's not going to cost 2 million.
Well, I'd hope not, yeah. Because I was going to also ask Angela if she was here, but that's I would suggest that in her reports that she identify all acronyms at least once so that we know who, when she says Corrales Main Street, it's spelled out Corrales Main Street, then she can have the acronym. Because there are a lot of acronyms she's tossing around in those reports. I have no idea what she's talking about. And it's just a suggestion that I like to see at least identification once, then she can use that acronym all over whatever she wants.
Absolutely.
Thank
I
you.
agree with you. Yes, sir. Council Burkett.
Just a brief follow-up on one of his points. I'm hoping we use this tree trimming that's happening right now as a lesson to make sure that with our franchise agreement with P&M that they are much more proactive, because the way they're trimming these trees right now, hopefully we don't lose a ton of them, but they look terrible. They're being trimmed for speed. They're not being trimmed for health. And it's going to be really problematic, I think, come spring. So I think there's gonna be a lot more dead ones that they're gonna have to cut down later because of the manner in which they're doing this, just trying to get down the road as quick as possible. But hopefully a lesson that we take to heart and improve on in the future.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. So we'll move on to Corralanos Forum. This section is for informational purposes only, not for discussion or debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or a concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. There will be a 3-minute time limit for each speaker. Melanie?
Okay. Up first by Zoom, we have Shonda Vihill. Shonda, are you online? Shonda, if you're online, you're muted.
Guy working with Amy. And I handed it to Michael. I said, what is this?
Hello? Can people on Zoom hear us? Okay, we will move on to the next one. Philip Clark, also by Zoom. And Philip, if you could state your name and address for the record, make sure you unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening, counselors. Good evening, Mayor. My name's Phil Clark. I live at 25 Leal Lane in Corrales at the corner of Corrales Road and Leal. I just wanted to take a minute tonight to bring up a concern about wildlife management and vacant property management. I think it touches a little bit on animal control, but maybe also on code enforcement. My wife and I commute by bike daily and make heavy use of the lateral drain maintenance road, going back and forth, taking kids to school, getting to and from work. And we've noticed a large increase in the number of coyotes running on the lateral maintenance road in the past 4 years, particularly around vacant lots and untended buildings that front that lateral drain road. This past spring, we noticed several mothers leading pups, and we noticed that they've been a little more brazen and a little less fearful around bikes and around our 2 daughters. And just wanted to bring up the fact that, you know, like just in our little 1/4-mile radius around our home, there are about 6 vacant pieces of land, some with buildings in various states of, you know, disrepair that don't have frequent visits from property owners. Some are manufactured, some have crawl spaces that coyotes can easily access under fences that aren't, you know, kept up. And just wanted to put a concern out there because there are several children under 2 years old in the area in this 1/4-mile radius. And if they can get our chickens and get our neighbor's small dog, you know, there's nothing stopping them from getting a small child one of these days. So, you know, I know animal control has been responsive when we've called them about our animals and offered good advice and asked us to call whenever we see, you know, coyotes on the prowl. But it's so common and there are so many of them in these vacant lots that would be a lot of work. So I just wanted to put that out there and say that I think animal control is doing great work, but maybe a little bit of sort of proactive monitoring of the vacant properties for animal activity would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, up next here in the council chambers, we have Bob Eichhorst. Bob, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes.
Okay, Bob Eichhorst, live in Corrales. 2 things real quick before I get to my point. If you had any complaints about the kids laughing at APS schools, they're not in the village. You got APS presenting later on, I don't see them. APS is a separate governmental entity that the village has no control over. It's a separate entity like the state highway is, like MRGCD is. They come as respect for you guys to inform you, but they're not in the village. It's a separate governmental entity. The second one on the noise, I've got so many noises in my own head from tinnitus, I can't hear much of anything they have anyway. But we had some of these houses, most of them were 12 to 18 hours without electricity. Some were 3 days without electricity. I don't know if all of them have been fixed yet. But without electricity, they also didn't have water. Now, this is a taboo subject in the village. Everybody says we can't talk about a water system, and I don't know why in the heck we don't. We're probably the biggest village in the whole state that doesn't have a water system. Typically, the water system is the first thing that goes in after electricity. Instead, we got a damn effluent system that shouldn't have been put in to start with. We need a water system. We went days and days and days with no water. If we ever look into a water system, I would not ever recommend tying into Rio Rancho. Albuquerque has water line available. They have indicated their willingness to work with us to supply the water and actually do the billing. They're a lot cheaper. And real quick, we're being compared to Los Ranchos. Please don't compare Corrales with Los Ranchos. They got screwed over so bad. during this COVID fiasco, they got that monstrosity on 4th Street. Don't compare us to them. But a water system is viable. Right now, our congressional members up in Congress have so much money available that they can dole out to help us design it. Once you get a design, then you can start with installation. There's a lot of money available and you better go for it now before you lose it, because it will be apparently tied up pretty good. But years ago when I was on council, we looked into a water system. We didn't have the money. That's when we were almost bankrupt. We were within a month or two of being bankrupt village. And so we didn't spend any money.
Thank you, Mr. Acorst. That's your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is Matt Guthrie. Matt, if you'll come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. If I can get the timer to reset.
My name is Matt Guthrie. I live at 377 Ruffles Lane, basically Meadowlark and Loma Larga. And this is to address the other gentleman on the coyote issue. There's been a lot of pets being attacked. We see a lot of this on the next door neighbor site. Our own dog was attacked within the walls of our walled yard. And I want to say she got away from the ninja skills that I taught her, but the vet said, no, it was a young, inexperienced coyote, but the coyotes are very brazen and there are attacks. And one that brought me here was one that a dog got attacked and almost killed. And the owners was standing right there within their yard, watching their dog get attacked. And the guy had to fight the coyote to get off. New Mexico has 122,000 square miles of land. We're ranked 45th in the nation for density, population density. So there's no reason that we should be forced to live so closely with such unruly characters as these coyotes. I think the village could step up. They could capture these coyotes, spay and neuter them while they have them, try to get them healthy, release them, and if they're pregnant, we have no problem with abortion everywhere else in the world. Abort that litter and move on. Let's reduce that population. I fly an airplane across the state. This state is beautiful and there's so many wide open areas. These coyotes have plenty of places to live. They choose to live here where it's easy, where people feed them. It ought to be a huge fine to feed coyotes and rabbits. And I don't know how you would enforce it, but it's got there was a statement with the noise ordinance, make it firm enough that it's going to hurt. So anyway, I think it really needs to be addressed. One quick thing on the noise is you realize Mayor Keller's wanting to put his United Stadium less than 2 miles from this building. And when the wind's the right way, you're going to have soccer noise for hours. So just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Okay, next is Sabine Schurter. Sabine, if you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes.
Okay. Oh, I missed it, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Sabine Schurter, 47 Rincon Road. I found it interesting when during the councilor discussion about the proposed noise ordinance, that there was this majority issue, that the majority of villagers apparently don't care. And that it's only a little minority of people being affected. I find that, I don't know, a little bit shocking, because when I look at this, what do you love about Corrales? You're all familiar with this little poster here from the comprehensive plan. Community, huge. People here like community. They also love, among other things, peacefulness, tranquility, quietness, rural feel, neighborhood, and so forth. There's other things. Now, my question is, why would the community not care about often elderly residents in the mixed-use neighborhood commercial district with limited means? Why would they just discard them? Why would the community say, well, we don't suffer from noise. We love it quiet here. But if some people do, who cares? So I would just like to put this out as food for thought, to think about the term community in Corrales, what it means. And also say one thing, there's homes here in Corrales in the agricultural residential areas being advertised with backyards large enough to host events, with tremendous potential for a savvy buyer. These houses are not even in the so-called commercial core. They are out in neighborhoods. And these events are taking place. There's event venues out there. I have no idea how those got approved. So this promise of tranquility, quietness, rural feel becomes thinner and thinner in Corrales. Please consider this when you develop a noise ordinance. Protect the residents. It would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan Hashimoto. And I believe, Joan, you're here representing the Bosque Advisory Commission, yes? Okay.
I'm Joan Hashimoto at 485 East La Entrada, and I'm the chair of the Bosque Advisory Commission. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I want to express my thanks for people who made the bosque wood removal at Andrews Lane on Saturday, October 26th, a success. They were our Corrales Fire Chief, Anthony Martinez, and Public Works drivers, Marcus and Steve, and 7 hardworking citizens. Some of them are right there. There were 21,300 pounds of wood hauled to the green waste section of the landfill at Sandoval County, the green waste section, which the county allows to be dumped without charge. And there's our fire chief with his tractor and brush grapple attachment. Also, as a Corrales resident, I would also like to express my sincere gratitude to our public safety and public works staff for their hard work during and after the storm. We're so lucky to have them. So thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mayor, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Joan, so most of the wood, is it cottonwood or is there elm and other trees that are in there that could be used for firewood?
Well, some of it's decayed, but a lot of it is decayed. It's been sitting on at the levee toe for
Okay, so
quite
it's
some
not-
time.
It's not suitable for firewood to give to seniors that might need it.
Not this stuff. It's cottonwood, elm, and Russian olive.
Okay. I'm just
So-
curious. I was, because I know some of our seniors, the only way they could stay warm in their house after this outage, if they had a fireplace, they could, they'd build fire, or they had a wood stove, something like that. My neighbor, unfortunately, down the road from me, she had neither. She had a potbelly stove, but I don't think it'd been used for 20 years. And she wrote it out, bless her heart, 2 days without power, but she just stayed under the covers. But if we have seniors that need firewood, I'm just hoping that maybe we could use some of that if it's available.
I believe there is firewood available at the substation.
Okay.
Have to check with the chief.
All right. Thank you.
I believe there is some.
Yes, sir, Councilman.
Real quickly on that point, yes, the substation up there, they have a lot of really good hardwood up there.
Yes,
And there's a lot of it, bunch of it, and different sizes.
it's in much better shape than what we are hauling out of there.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Joan. Okay, up next is Doug Castile. If you'll state your name and address for the record, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Doug Castile, and I'm living on Chaparral Lane. Mr. Mayor, esteemed council members. In the problem we were discussing regarding sound ordinances and sound disturbances to citizens of Corrales. I support what Tessa laid forth. I had a call with a good friend of mine, Joe Craig, the late mayor of Los Ranchos, and I asked him about that. And even though his ordinance with the decibel system is a little bit more stringent than the other communities that Tessa mentioned, he said that he has had no problem with that. The main problem with Rio Rancho was high school parties that got out of hand, but the noise issue was not an issue there. So that's something we might consider. But I have lots of existential angst over the last election here, so I'm trying to focus hard. Republicans and Democrats can't compromise, but I think we can compromise here in Corrales. And I think business owners need to yield some ground to the residents that live next to them. I think it's the only logical thing to do. I would like to see a prima facie ordinance blessed by this council before it rears its head again next spring, and it will. And so we need to probably address that. And we could also address it in means of, if we have issues enforcing something like that. Of course, the radical thing that could happen that would save time, money, and everything would be to completely ban amplified music outside. That is an extreme if we can't reach a common ground meeting of the minds. I also think if that doesn't happen, we need to have that new, hopefully new code or ordinance that can be enforced. Now, that's a hard thing to do, but Tessa mentioned a scaled fine scenario, which I think hits the people that are perpetrating the sound issues in the pocketbook. And it goes up in scale every time they're issued one of those citations. And it's easy on the village for enforcement. They write a citation, they're supposed to go to court and pay a fine. And so I'm hoping that it doesn't go to that extreme either. But I think compromise is the word that we want here in Corrales. And I was hoping some of the business owners would speak to it. I'm not personally affected so much by the noise.
Doug, that's your time.
I live farther south, but the wind will blow it down and I can hear it on occasion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and last this evening is Mr. Fred Hashimoto. He'll come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Fred Hashimoto, I live at 485 East Lawn Charlotte. I was not on the noise committee, but I'd like to thank you all for redoing the noise ordinance and taking it very seriously. As Tessa explained, many options exist. Perhaps the simplest, most straightforward and easiest to enforce is, as Doug said, no amplified sounds outside of enclosed buildings. There's no amplified sounds outside, except for permitted special cases. We like our 1 acre properties because we don't bother others and others don't bother us, which is really nice. In that spirit, we keep stormwater, runoffs, lights, odors, and our pets on our own properties. Noise obviously should be kept on one's own property too. Consideration for others is a golden rule in the village, even though it might not be so outside of it. Perhaps the biggest issue of noise ordinance is enforceability. We've heard that a lot of times. We've heard that village officers might not be able to use decibel meters or clearly hear a sound. Loudness of sound can be objective and or subjective, which makes decisions about what is too loud very difficult to agree upon. Duration of allowable sound and the number of people who are bothered by it can seem arbitrary too. However, having no amplified sounds outside of enclosed buildings is a simple and not unique concept. It is easily and clearly discernible. You can hear it, you can feel it, you can see it, and thereby enforceable. It might not be perfect for all, but it is a reasonable, smart step in the right direction for noise control. I think we can start with that. And it's not hard. It's not a hard concept. And we can build on that and have decibel levels and clearly audible sounds. But it's so easy just to say, okay, no amplified sounds outside of enclosed buildings. Please consider that as a first step in really looking at the noise ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's everyone.
So before we move to counselors forum, we're going to have Anthony, because somehow I missed him.
Right.
Anthony, you there?
Here he is.
I am. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Sorry I couldn't be present in person today. I'm gonna give you an update on some of what took place the other evening with all the power outages. So on 11/6, we got 51 dispatched calls for service within that evening and the next following day. We are still currently calculating our response. Some of the calls were not documented through dispatch. They were self-initiated. The calls include arcing and trees on lines, obviously. Power lines down. We had multiple power lines that actually shorted out and were on the ground or on fences. Roadways were blocked. We had one explosion call, which was probably a transformer. We had one structure fire that we were able to get under control that was related to the power being energized, and a heat lamp was laid on a wooden floor, and they thought they had turned it off, and when the power got turned back on, it started a fire in a bedroom. False alarms and medical related calls due to the power outage. So my response that evening started around 11 o'clock or so. We started receiving multiple calls, and our crews were just overwhelmed in the village. We had pending calls for service. It was just too much for, the initial crews to kind of respond, stand by arcing power lines, and then get another call. So it was definitely overwhelming for our on-shift crews. En route to the fire in the village, I immediately contacted PNM. We have a government liaison. Woke her up and said, hey, this is happening not just in the village, but all over. What's your plan? So we started coordinating that evening what PNM and what we can do to help them and try to put together a response plan for the village. Early on, we started realizing that a lot of trees were just breaking and falling. And I believe one of the counselors was talking about liability and responsibility of PNM. I could assure you some of the trees that I witnessed that were just falling over and crashing were privately owned trees. Some of them relied in our village easement right away, blocking roads. It was potentially dangerous. So we worked throughout the evening, coordinating with Public Works, the Graveyard PD to help us block off roads until we were able to safely remove some of the down trees. It's just some of the areas were just too dangerous to put firefighters in with chainsaws. It was so unpredictable that they were just falling everywhere around us. We periodically gave reports to our dispatch center on update on road conditions. We did our best to try to, funnel some of these calls for service. Our dispatch center was, getting overwhelmed. This was happening obviously around the whole metro area, Sandoval County. And so we weren't just dealing with this in our community, but it was all over. So that created a problem fighting for resources, for PNM because they were overwhelmed. During this process, we started, coordinating, handing out non-potable water to citizens if they needed it. At the fire station, our fire station has a backup generator, so we were fully functional. Our fire line systems, ever since we made the connection on Old Church Road, our main fire suppression pumps were able to charge not only the Corrales Road system, but the Loma Larga system, which was good that we got that in place. We were giving out, we gave out, I think, one citizen firewood, but we also have a stockpile at the fire substation for other firewood for citizens. With that though, whenever we give out firewood, we try to remind them that, especially during an event of an emergency like this, that you might want to reconsider lighting your old fireplace that you haven't inspected in a long time or had it cleaned. So we don't want to have them start a structure fire, of course. We handed out oxygen bottles to residents that lost their power and didn't have a backup power or battery backup for their oxygen machines. So we were able to provide them with extra oxygen cylinders until the morning, until they were able to contact their supplier to get additional oxygen bottles. We learned that this was a multi-layered response. We had the initial emergency response with multiple power lines arcing, explosions, fires in trees, lines down, trees down. Once the sun came up, we had a lot of residents, obviously, that woke up, went outside and reported, a bunch of trees that were not reported through our dispatch center that were either hanging on power lines, across roadways, maybe disconnected their power lines to their homes, which, we have majority of Corrales with overhead power lines. So when these trees do fall, they end up pulling them off the meters off the house. Which was critical for us to identify those properties before they energized. And that was like the last phase of this whole situation, was trying to coordinate an energizing plan. PNM was fantastic. They brought in extra crews. You as citizens witnessed that, you'd get power surges and then back off. Well, that was a lot to do with trees that were still either in power lines or shorting out transformers. Every time they try to re-energize, it would just short out the system. So that took some time to identify those areas, clear them out, and try to restore power to the citizens in a timely manner, but safe. We didn't want to deviate from any sort of public safety. Moving forward, I'm still compiling our lessons learned, what worked, what didn't work. One of the things is we need to promote to the citizens to have an emergency action plan, all hazard plan for your home, your family, your animals, period. Some of these things could have been avoided. You can have drinking water, you can have flashlights, extra oxygen bottles in the event of a power failure. Working with PNM, I know that I've given you briefings in the past. I've really been working hard with their forestry management and trying to come up with a plan. I know a couple weeks ago, the mayor put in his mayor's message that PNM is going to be out. Their priority is, clearing out the trees in the power lines along Corrales Road, the 3-phase lines. Then, of course, the single-phase lines that are lateral off of that. That was the plan. I think this storm event kind of expedited it. I did hear one of the counselors saying that the trees are being kind of trimmed up kind of quickly to clear out the hazard. Yes, that's true. We need to work with the citizens and our code enforcement officers and the citizens that own these trees. They need to start managing them so they don't get back in the power lines. We don't have this again. Luckily, this happened during a winter storm where it was moist out. If this would have been a high wind, high fire danger day, we'd have had fires all over this village and it would have been a different scenario. And like Melanie said, we're working on a franchise agreement. I've been writing up some stuff to add to it, but after this event, I'm gonna have to go back and change it because there's some lessons learned that we didn't anticipate in the first draft that I would like to add moving forward. So in a total, there was 4,074 meters without power in the village. So it was village wide. So.
So is everybody back up?
Oh yeah, they ended up doing they called in crews from, I believe, Texas, other states to come in. They were overwhelmed. The tree trimming crews that you saw the last couple of days, or yesterday and today, and they're gonna be out tomorrow. They are also from Houston and local, and they're at force. They're going out, they're trimming up the trees, trying to make it safer. I'm gonna be working with a couple of citizens. They have stopped the tree trimming crews from doing their work. So I'm gonna try to make contact with them. Remind them that the easement and the utility lines, that they have a right to go in there and clear it for public safety and health and safety of the community. But it's just an educational thing. Anyone have any questions?
Councilor Murray.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you for all your work.
You're
And
welcome.
I think they did an outstanding job. So a couple issues. My neighbors across the street from me on the west side of Uva Road, the line runs across their property. The P&M line runs across private property. Obviously the trees are, an issue, like you say. Is it P&M's responsible to trim those up, or is it the neighbors?
So not knowing the line, if it's a triplex line that's coming off of a transformer to the residence, to a meter and a breaker box, my understanding is that is the responsibility of the property owner to make sure they don't plant trees underneath that line and make sure they're maintenance and trimmed before they get into that line.
All right, so the other issue though is the clear ditch back behind on the west side of Uva Road is an MRGCD ditch. There are power lines that run across from the Uva side over to the Via Fasan side. Again, is it MRGCD then that has to clean that up, or is it P&M?
So it's a combination. So I've been out there multiple times. It's definitely a problem location. We've reported it multiple times. We actually scheduled a meeting last week for this Thursday with the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy to look at that Sandoval lateral, or the San Mateo drain, sorry, and try to come up with a plan and try to coordinate it with P&M, Conservancy, and possibly our crews so we can get it done. It's overgrown and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I totally agree, because the main line itself came from Corrales Road and it runs down to the north part of, I think it's one of our neighbors' road. Now he's got a pole and then his line comes off that pole down to his house. The trees in the neighbor adjacent to him were on the line and caused the pole to lean. And there was some concern about whether they were going to energize that line because they didn't know whether the pole was going to stick. Fortunately, they did. So they did, the tree trimmers are out there. I do applaud that they came in, and we had to get permission from the property owner because she is now renting the property to somebody else. But we did get it resolved, and I think they did a good job, making sure that the power was restored in a timely fashion. So thank you and your group.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Anybody else? Anthony, thanks again.
Yep, you're welcome. I also wanted to add that we applied for a drinking water filtration system through Homeland Security. We're still waiting to hear. And we also applied for a cooling, heating, generator trailer system. The reasoning for that was, fire events and winter storms. And we're also waiting to hear on that, but that would have been very useful during this storm. We could have set up that drinking water system off of one of our fire stations, and we could have been able to convert, even from a fire hydrant, drinking water quality to provide drinking water to citizens. And I know Tanya did hand out drinking water to citizens as well if they needed it. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay, so you ready to go to council's forum? Council's forum, this section is for informational purposes only, not for discussion or debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or a concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the regular business session. A council member may respond to an issue or a concern brought up by a resident in the preceding Coriolanus forum, but to remain in compliance with the Open Meeting Act, the subject will not be up for debate or discussion due to not being listed as an agenda item with proper public notice. Anybody have anything they want to talk about now? Counselor Knight.
Just real quick, I have a friend whose son works at the Rail Runner, and he offered to take me through their offices because I'm the representative for Corrales. So I went down about a week ago, and it's just, they share the building with Mr. Cog.
Yeah.
And it's just on like 8th and off of Central.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing to see how high tech it is at the Rail Runner. He brought me into one of the operations rooms, and there were 2 women in there, and they probably had 50 screens in front of them. And all the screens are looking at the platforms to make sure that there's, you know, say if there's any safety issues, they're right on it. They took me into another operations room where this gentleman, they have a crew of like 4 people that are there 24/7, 365 days a year. And that operation room looks at all the rail traffic in and around the state. And it was, like I said, I was amazed. If anybody ever gets a chance to go down there, it's pretty high tech and pretty cool. So.
Yes, sir, Councilor. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Down in the basement right there, right? And
Yeah.
it's really pretty neat, the fact that they're able to keep track with those the guys that are running the trains. They keep track of them all the time, so making sure they're awake even at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, and one other thing, they said like 8,000 cars can go through Berlin in one day.
Wow.
Because there's a big railroad station down there that they switch cars, and I wasn't even aware of that. So it was pretty interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quickly, the hour is late, but just, I know that you all got a quick memo from me about tomorrow meeting at 3 o'clock. We won't probably be hearing the message that we're interested in until about 4:30 at Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, talking about the siphon specifically. And so that's one issue. And then the other one real quickly, we've been keeping track, and we letting you all know that especially want to thank some of the council members looking at that special valuation of property for primary for agricultural uses. And I had a nice long talk with, we had our conversation here with our county assessor, and I had a kind of long meeting with Damian from Bernalillo County. And he sat down with me and actually gave us some specific pieces of language that we might want to use for this upcoming legislative session. I'll be real quick on it, but the resting of land, I think, was one of those big issues as a result of, I'm just going to go real quick on that one. The result of moderate drought conditions designated by the United States Department of Agriculture, and he's suggesting that we add the New Mexico Department of Agriculture, local conservation soil and water districts to be included in that they can make the decision whether or not there is a moderate or drought conditions, giving people special advantages to their local property taxes. So we're on it, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council members, and we'll keep you informed as to what's going on.
So you're going to have a meeting here tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the
MRG.
Oh, you're going to at MRGCD.
They're going to have one over there.
Gotcha.
And at 4:30, they're going to have not a relook, but a look again at the what's going on with their siphon system. And they're going to be having San Felipe was going to come down as well. And
Well, that's good.
and talk some issues about it. So you're all invited. And I've been keeping in contact, and we have a preliminary piece of legislation thanks to Representative Cates.
So should we notice that as a possible quorum?
I'll do that first thing in the morning.
Yes, sir. Councilor Woolman.
Yes, Mayor, this is related to issues brought up in the Coriolanus Forum, and it has to do with coyotes. And I'd like to ask the chief, if I could. The coyote management plan calls for, and it's about a page and a half, 2 pages long. And at the end, it calls for a report from Animal Services on a yearly basis to report to the council. I've been on the council for 4.5 years and I haven't seen a report. Is that something that we can get in terms of incidents, number of coyotes in the village, those kinds of things that they're aware of? Is that?
Counselor Waldman, Mayor, Council. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I actually, I guess everybody didn't get a copy, but I've seen those, yes. It is done. And
is
we
that the-
can,
you mean
we
the
can
one line?
probably, you got the last, I think I saw the last 4 years, I think. Wasn't that what you sent me?
Mayor and Council, I believe the last I saw was the 2024 log to date. And it shows where there's coyote activity and the nature of it. And they essentially keep an Excel spreadsheet on the activity, and they do what they can. But, again, not to dive too deep into the weeds on this, I don't believe that the Village of Corrales Police Department or Corrales Animal Services are, in a position to eradicate a species from.
No,
our
no,
jurisdiction.
this is just reports that they get.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If we can get those,
But we don't know that
absolutely.
everybody reports it. That was the other issue.
Well, yeah, of course not.
Yeah, I mean, you get a
Sure.
cat or a dog or a chicken that gets picked up and taken off, and you may or may not know if it was a dog or a coyote that did that.
Yep.
Because I think we do have feral dogs here in the village.
Yep.
Okay,
Good, thank you. Yep.
Any more? Anybody else? Counselor Alsobrook.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief.
Just a comment about P and M. So absolutely nothing but admiration and respect for all the crews who are out here responding. Goes without saying. Minimal respect for P and M's ability to plan. I hope that we can incorporate into our contract negotiations something that will get them to model themselves after the tortoise and slowly go through the village, taking care of the trees, because frankly, we're all very impressed when the hare comes blazing by and saves our butts. But I'd rather see the tortoise moving through the village every day.
Well, Anthony has been very good about finding a vegetation management plan that we could hopefully incorporate into our agreement with P and M.
Right.
But, takes both sides. Anybody else? Okay. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Approval of minutes from October 22nd, 2024 regular council meeting, and approval of resolution 24-A1, a budget adjustment resolution. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
There we go. Anybody want to talk about it? It's a consent agenda. It's not usually up for discussion, so it's a resolution. So Councilor Murray, how would you vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Burkett?
Yes.
Councilor Alsobrook?
Yes.
Councilor Knight?
Aye.
Councilor Wallman?
Aye.
And Councilor Muir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, I don't have I don't have a calendar on here. So I don't know what dates we're gonna be doing meetings.
I gave a list in the packet.
I don't have it.
Mayor,
They're Tuesdays.
I will confirm that it does.
How about Tuesday? Oh, I just found it. Okay. Does anybody have an issue with any of the proposed meeting dates?
It actually matches up with my calendar.
Okay.
I would like to point out that there is no conflict with Valentine's Day this year.
Holy moly.
Yes.
But we are having a meeting on Veterans Day.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That-
my suggestion would be that if we're moving the November meeting to the third Tuesday, that we also move the December meeting to the third Tuesday, just so the language in the resolution is nice and tidy. Because
I
we
don't have-
typically
I don't
have
have a problem with that.
one meeting those 2 months.
It'd be December 16th and November 18th.
Yeah.
That's middle of the months, basically.
Yeah.
Does anybody have an issue with that? Go ahead.
Well, I don't have an issue with that particular one, no. I just had a general.
Okay, general.
In days gone by, in the heat of the summer months, we would occasionally have just one meeting a month. There's just no possibility of doing that anymore.
No.
Okay.
You just do your usual and zoom in or don't come. No, it's really necessary
Yep.
that we have two.
Especially
meetings
in July.
So much.
because there's a lot to do and things come up, grants come up, approvals for various things
I know the
come up.
budget comes up as well, so I know that's part of it.
But we need 2 meetings a month. Yes, sir.
So this is just a suggestion, but I think we need to have a quarterly work study with council administration, just to have a general bull session, basically, just talk about things in the village. We don't get a chance as a group to talk about issues, what we hear from our constituents. And I think just, once a quarter, let's have a little work study and let's just talk about this.
That's actually been suggested in the past and we just never have done it.
Well, I think we ought to do it.
Okay, well, you guys write a little Post-it note and we'll bring it up.
Do you want to do it prior to a regular council meeting?
I mean, that's one way. Yeah. I mean, that'd probably be the most effective. Just, 1 hour, just have a general session where we talk about things that we found in the village or people have commented on. And it just gives us a general conversation with each other.
I think people you may not like this. I don't think I'm not real excited about doing it on the same day as a meeting.
Yeah, whatever.
It's a long evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to have we could say, all right, we'll meet at 6 o'clock or 6:30 and give us an hour.
Yeah.
And then we go,
Yeah.
because it's not like we're having to do
I'm not
something.
worried when, I just like to do it.
Okay. Okay. Well, think about your schedules and when would be best. Would you like to do it in the odd, February's and, the even months or something like that?
Just not on Valentine's Day.
Okay, so we're gonna do November 18th and December 16th, Melanie,
Yes, if that's,
and that's
Good
okay
with
with
council.
you and your language?
yes. Yeah, I'll just say third Tuesday of the month in November and December.
Okay, very good. All right. So announcements for future agenda items. We have a presentation by APS on the design for the new K-8 school on Corrales Elementary School site 1210. We have to approve the Open Meeting Act resolution on 1210. We have to approve holidays for the village employees. And this is of specific interest to Councilor Murray, I know, because he likes to give our employees holidays.
Yes, I do.
That's also in 1210. And then we have, we have the RFP for our village attorney on 1210.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
So just an FYI, my son tells me that the APS has already released their RFP for the school.
Okay.
It's in the wild.
You thought they were going to listen to us?
No, no, but he was just telling me, he likes to keep me informed about contracts that are coming up, that they might be able to bid on, but he did see that the APS contract for the K-8, it's out.
Yeah, I think all we can provide for them is maybe some kind of oversight, just try to say, really focus on the traffic issue. It's a big deal. We don't like too high buildings, if you could cut it, that kind of stuff. I don't think they're going to listen to us very much.
Well, when they gave the presentation at the school and I went to it, one of my concerns was the long drive on the south side that goes down and makes a U-turn and comes back. I was telling them, you need to have an emergency exit out to the lateral drain area. So if somebody bollocks is up the front, you got another way out, so the cars don't get, caught up in that.
Make you a Post-it note when they come, bring it up.
I actually talked with them about that in a different meeting at a different time, but especially about the fact that they're gonna have to use that. I mean, I think I brought it up here. They're gonna have to use the lateral when they have a fire escape or whatever it is. They're gonna have to use that ditch. And I think the big issue, not the big issue, but the issue that we can remind them about is they might have to relook at the little to get over that drain to make sure that it's solid. And for the kids are gonna have to walk in to walk down the rain. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just remind them that I talked to them about that, or we had brought that issue up on that and utilization of some of their monies that they have. And I said, I don't think we should have to pay for any of that. So they're well.
They don't
aware of that.
ask us and they don't get any money from us.
Yeah. Just thought we'd bring that up because
Okay,
they have the funds for that.
I think we have dealt with all the business, and so the meeting is adjourned.
Bedtime.